whose hair do you think is going to be longer at the end of all of this? Mine or yours?
Well, if you don't cut it, it's definitely yours.
I could really use some help from a professional at this point.
Yeah, me too. You know, a friend of mine asked me just recently, like maybe 2 weeks ago, so it's a little bit of time, but he asked me, he was like, I bet you're growing a beard. Are you growing a beard? And I actually was like, no, no, I'm not. I've been shaving pretty regularly. And then I realized just a few days ago for some other Zoom chat, I was like, I completely have a beard because
That's a
I
beard.
realized I had to sort of trim it and stuff. So it's it's funny how this time is unlike any other where hair just grows. I guess.
Do you feel like you just had this inherent sense of this thing that you just said about, I think you said being of service. Is that what you just said?
Yeah,
I think that's what you just said. I got to tell you, not every number one I've met or worked with has that anywhere in their consciousness. Which is why I think there's a certain trepidation that everybody has. I think it probably goes both ways. I think actors who are preparing to star in something might be like, I hope this showrunner isn't a fucking tyrant, right?
Yeah.
I think it goes both ways, but I'm wondering where that sense of what your job is came from. Did you witness it? Because you started really young.
Yeah, I mean, but well, it's inherent and I think intuitive, you know, it's instinctual, like you were saying earlier. But I've also started to do it very consciously, just because I feel like it's the only, well, for instance, like right now, we are surrounded by the discourse right now is like so volatile, and there's so many things happening right now that are so unjust in the world. And I'm even thinking about this interview is like, for anybody who ends up watching this, anybody who ends up watching this show, furthermore, like that balance between helping people to relax and enjoy, because ultimately we're creating a piece of entertainment, and then also to provoke, because we're also creating a piece of art, you know. And that's that balance of working in a professional commercial art form, which is so interestingly threaded through with so much like complication, and sometimes it's opposing forces, sometimes it feels very synergistic. So all of that to say, all of that rambling and coherence aside, I feel like, to me, if you do something in the spirit of service, you can transmute anything, like anything. And the unfortunate truth about a number one on the call sheet for actors is like, there's so much attention. I mean, I can at least commiserate with those who end up being the ones who are kind of infamous, you know, the notorious ones, because so much attention is heaped. You can't like, it's hard to ask people to not do things for you. Like, I would get to the point sometimes I'm like, just please let me get my own water. Like, I'm not like, please let me get my own water.
The aunties are terrified. Like,
right.
If I lose sight of him, you know, they're thinking like $35,000 an hour is what they're thinking.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. No, that's it. Is like, you can't be like, the plus side is that, like, you know, if you ask for something, whether graciously or not, chances are you'll get it. Within reason, right? But then the flip side is that, like, you can't pee or like take a breath or just go outside for a quick phone call, even if there's like, you know, I mean, if there's an emergency at home, sure, but you know, there's a lot of pressure, and because it's all focusing on your bodily presence for the 12 hours you're at work, or let's be real, the 14 hours, you know, like generally it's for 5 days a week for 5 months at a time, if not longer. When we used to do network stuff, we're talking 26 episodes. It's like 10 months out of the year. So, you know, it's an interesting thing where I think actors have a tough spot. Oh, poor actors, where they
it's true though. It's what you're
it
talking
is
about
kind
is
of ironically true.
Really a tight little fishbowl. And when everyone is, and there's something a little infantilizing about what you're describing, but it's happening to try to give you everything you need to do your incredibly vulnerable work. So it's not people think of you that way. It's that they're trying to facilitate, and the wires get crossed for people pretty easily, I think.
It's true.
So,
and everybody
you know?
sort of thinks you are your character, and that becomes exhausting.
Oh God. That's not true
depending
on
on
this
who the
show.
character is. Well, right, but I mean, and it's that we have there's no doubt we have this kind of endless fascination, or maybe it's ending. It definitely seems like
Mm,
it's showing some death rattle. But we have this fascination with celebrity, so that those who are in that position honestly are enduring a really interesting kind of psychological washing machine. It's really, really intense. It's been my experience, at least, and I'm not suggesting it's such a struggle that it's like greater than any other, not at all. But it is a unique psychological, kind of emotional gauntlet that's then thrown to you, because you are ultimately then given a lot of attention, often a lot of money. You're given a lot of visibility, and then the trick is that sometimes you think that's a form of power, but really then you're still a vessel.
mm,
You're still a vessel for words that you didn't write, things you didn't create, and that can be beautiful. I mean, because then you can just be kind of present. I mean, all I feel like I do as an actor is just be present with the words more and more, and then spontaneously whatever needs to happen will happen, if you can actually be present with the words. I think, but so it's a weird position that I could wax philosophically about for, kind of
but that thing
ever.
you're talking about, where you're like, the longer I do it, the more I feel like I let it move through me, even, or I'm
Yeah,
paraphrasing what you said, but like, I don't want to underplay the level of talent and skill that you're bringing to the table to do that. That you're acknowledging that there's an interpretive aspect to this art form. Being an actor is mostly interpretive, but
yeah, yeah,
that not everybody interprets the same. And if you hadn't come to this material the way that you did, the show wouldn't work. I mean, and I know some of that is just your vibe and how you show up in the world, and you look like Joe Goldberg looks, and you sound like Joe Goldberg sounds, but some of it are the choices you made about how to play him early, really early,
yeah,
because I don't think it's possible to separate the things you did in the pilot as you were trying to figure out how to navigate this dude that grossed you out, you know?
yeah, yeah.
Like, it informs every word we write now. Like, I can't think about Joe without thinking about how you play him, right? So we're at this point,
That's
we've been working
interesting.
together for
Yeah.
so long. It's just a direct conversation. When I write an action line for Joe, I'm just talking to you at
Of
this
course,
point.
totally. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
You
that's
and
true.
I'm
It's
saying, don't fuck
true.
it up, whoever the guest director is.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and that's cool actually, and that's what I think. I've never had such an intimate relationship with a showrunner, because it's never been actually even as necessary.
Mm,
And the funny thing is that relationship isn't so explicit, where we're like on the phone all the time. We're not doing that kind of thing. It's not actually. I think the beautiful thing about it is that that's not necessary. It happens in the work, which is frankly, I think, a
mhm.
testament to the the material, the project, just the vibe, everything that's been created. Because if we had to explain it to each other outside of interviews constantly, well, I think maybe then there would be something less graceful about that, I think. And so I've appreciated how it's been both very successful and then taken seriously, and but not too seriously. you know
Mhm.
and that's, I think, kind of how I approach most things. And what you were speaking to before is like, I think I have the benefit of a lot of years behind me, which I started to realize mostly in season 2. I started to
Mhm.
realize, like, I'm no longer the youngest one on a given set. I'm no longer like, I'm older than the PAs. That's new for me. That's really new, like, being
Mhm.
older than the PAs. Interesting. The
One
same
day you'll
age
be
as some
like,
of
shit, I
the
could be this guy's dad. That's gonna
right.
happen.
No, totally. Um, so, I think my years of experience just means that, like, a lot of the technical stuff I don't, I just, it's not even a
Mhm.
thing. It's, in fact, thinking about it more helps me, because I'm like, I don't want to be giving my all and not be conscious of the fact that it needs to be captured. So, like, I want to know
Mhm.
what a camera is. I want to know exactly what lights, everything with the voiceover. I want to know, like, a lot of it I let go of, and I can't know a lot of it. But then I even started thinking about, I found myself needing to ask directors at points in this process, like, how are you going to edit? Like, can you just tell me, where are you going to be in this moment? Because it really did, it just, because the role was so technical and so
Mhm.
central, I just had to I realized I started to have to become conscious of those things. And, you know, from what I understand, a lot of actors wouldn't like that. You know, they're like really, really, it's all about just the pure sort of work of the performance
Yeah.
and none of the technical stuff. But yeah, I don't know. My brain doesn't really work that way.
It's such a weird thing with this role too, because we're operating on a couple of levels. Like the level that's telling the story is not in agreement with Joe's perspective, though he's the narrator.
Right. That's
And
so
which
interesting.
I feel like we should point out that we're surrounded in making this show with people who are on the same page as me and as you. So
Yeah,
that's the other
that's
thing I
true.
think
Yeah.
that makes this really, I mean, I certainly don't do it all myself. Not only do I have a staff of writers who work with me and then a bunch of producers, but like we really lucked out with our producing directors. And that's a very particular job
Yeah.
where, you know, Marcos in season one and Marcos Diega and then Silver Tree this past season and coming into season 3, they not only do they tend to direct the biggest episodes, they're also tasked with explaining the nuances of the show to each guest director. So when someone you've never seen before shows up and you're supposed to be butt naked in this bed with Victoria Pedretti at 6 o'clock in the
Yeah.
morning, they are
You know,
aware.
I found that I could ask, I started to ask the ADs, I'm like, hey, can we schedule sex scenes later in the day? It's just better. It's for all people. Can we just do that? And they did it.
Moving forward, they're going to have to be post-quarantine or something. So,
Yeah, right.
like,
Sorry, I interrupted you though. What can you remember
no,
what you
well,
were saying?
good example, by the way, is something that the star of the show should say. It's like, I prefer to do my sex scenes after lunch. Like,
Yeah, when I'm not
that's good
digesting
information for us.
breakfast. And
No,
yeah.
just that like this thing you're talking about of you know you're aiming your performance to hit a certain sweet spot. You need to know that even if you've never seen the director before, the day that they show up on set, or if it's a writer who's new to you at Video Village, that they're on the same page and they've been given the same kind of boot camp about how we make the show and why we make the show. And we're so particular about how we shoot the women in the scenes with you. Like the way we shoot them is so different when we're through Joe's point of view than when we're in a more objective point of view. Joe's point of view is a little more salacious. But we would lose credibility if we did it the other way, right? So the whole machine around you is trying to support the point of the story, right? And then you pop into the middle of it and basically are a magician and like make the whole magic trick work, I think.
Well, we could go on, but I think we have to stop.
Have we done all our minutes?
I think
yeah,
yeah, inevitably.